Welcome to the American Gazetteer. Tonight, we turn the pages of the great national atlas back to the year 1877. We journey west of the Allegheny Mountains to the heart of the Buckeye State, to a region where the vast, glaciated plains of the north meet the rugged, sandstone foothills of the south. We travel to the verdant, industrious, and historically rich district of Fairfield County, Ohio. In the year of our Lord, 1877, Fairfield County stood as a monument to the quiet prosperity of the agrarian Midwest. According to the census records of the previous decade and the estimates of the current year, the population of this fertile district numbered approximately 33,340 industrious souls. These inhabitants were the descendants of the sturdy pioneers from Virginia, Pennsylvania, and New England, who had first crossed the mountains to find a land of milk and honey. They were a people noted for their thrift, their piety, and their unwavering devotion to the cultivation of the soil. The county itself forms an irregular yet pleasing shape upon the map, enclosing an area of 505 square miles, or roughly 323,000 acres of land. The boundaries of Fairfield County in 1877 were established with the geometric precision of the surveyor's chain. To the north, the county line adjoined the fertile lands of Licking County and the growing capital region of Franklin County. To the east, the rugged and coal-rich hills of Perry County formed a natural and political barrier. To the south, the scenic and precipitous cliffs of Hocking County rose to greet the traveler, marking the entrance to the wilder Appalachian Plateau. To the west, the flat, corn-rich plains of Pickaway and Franklin counties extended toward the horizon, a sea of green in the summer and gold in the autumn. The topography of Fairfield County is a study in contrasts, a landscape divided by the ancient hand of the glaciers. The Great Divide traverses the county, separating the waters that flow toward the Great Lakes from those that flow toward the Gulf of Mexico. The northern and western townships comprising the districts of Violet, Liberty, Walnut, Richland, and Greenfield are characterized by the smooth, undulating surface of the glacial drift. Here, the ancient ice sheets smooth the earth like a carpenter's plane, leaving behind a soil of deep, black loam, rich with vegetable mold and clay. This soil is inexhaustibly fertile, producing year after year the immense harvests of wheat, corn, oats, and barley that made Fairfield County the garden spot of Ohio. As one travels southward, however, the character of the land transforms. Crossing the invisible glacial boundary into the townships of Byrne, Hocking, Madison, and Rush Creek, the land begins to heave and swell. The gentle rolls give way to the majestic sandstone hills of the Hocking Valley. The valleys become narrower and more winding, the slopes steeper and more wooded. Here, the massive formations of the Waverly Sandstone jut from the earth, creating picturesque bluffs and rocky precipices that stand as silent sentinels over the farms below. The hydrography of the county is extensive and soothing to recite. The waters of the county are the lifeblood of its agriculture and the motive power of its industry. The principal stream is the Hocking River, known to the indigenous peoples as the Hocking or Bottle River. 3. It takes its rise in the northwestern wetlands near Greencastle and flows southeastwardly, gathering volume and strength as it winds through the center of the county. The Hocking is a gentle, steady stream, bordered in 1877 by ancient sycamores and willows, its waters turning the wheels of the grist mills that dotted its banks. The list of tributaries that feed the Hocking and the other river systems is a litany of pastoral names. There is Rush Creek, which drains the eastern townships of Richland and Rush Creek. 4. There is Little Rush Creek. 5. There is Clear Creek, flowing through the rocky glens of the southwest. And the 6. There is Muddy Prairie Run, a slow-moving stream that waters the rich bottomlands of the west. There is Pleasant Run. There is Fetters Run. 7. There is Baldwin Run. There is Sycamore Creek. There is Pawpaw Creek. There is Walnut Creek, which flows northward to feed the Canal Reservoir. There is Poplar Creek. There is Blacklick Creek. Each of these streams, in the year 1877, meandered through fields of corn and wheat, crossed by wooden-covered bridges that rumbled softly under the wheels of passing wagons. The natural covering of the land, where the plow had not yet conquered, consisted of noble forests. In 1877, the woodlots of Fairfield County were still extensive, providing timber for building and fuel for the hearth. The ridges were crowned with stands of white oak, black oak, chestnut oak, and hickory. The slopes bore the sugar maple, the beech, and the walnut. In the moist bottom lands, the elm, the ash, the buckeye, and the sycamore grew to immense proportions. These forests were not merely sources of lumber. They were the home of the gray squirrel, the raccoon, and the fox, and in the autumn they provided a bounty of nuts, walnuts, hickory nuts, and chestnuts for the rural families. The soil of the county varied with the topography. In the drift regions of the north, it was a deep, black alluvium, capable of sustaining the heaviest crops of corn without exhaustion. In the hill country of the south, the soil was a lighter, sandy loam, warm and quick, admirably referenced for the cultivation of potatoes, melons, and fruit. The orchards of Fairfield County were famous in 1877, producing abundant yields of apples, peaches, pears, and cherries. The names of the apple varieties grown here, the Rambo, the Northern Spy, the Baldwin, the Russet, and the Maiden's Blush, were spoken with pride by the farmers of Amanda and Greenfield Townships. In the geographical center of this varied and beautiful landscape sits the county seat, the city of Lancaster. In the year 1877, Lancaster was a dignified, historic, and flourishing city of approximately 6,000 inhabitants. Founded in the year 1800 by Colonel Ebenezer Zane, the blazer of the famous Zane's Trace, the city had grown from a cluster of log cabins in the wilderness to a center of commerce, law, and culture, renowned throughout the state for the intelligence of its bar and the stability of its institutions. The city is situated in the beautiful valley of the Hocking River, where the stream emerges from the level plains and enters the hill country. It is surrounded by an amphitheater of hills that shelter it from the winter winds and provide a scenic backdrop of surpassing beauty. The most prominent of these eminences is Mount Pleasant, a massive, isolated hill of sandstone that rises abruptly 250 feet above the northern edge of the town. Known to the native inhabitants as the Standing Stone, this rocky sentinel commanded a view of the Hocking Valley for 20 miles. In 1877, it was a favorite resort for the citizens, who would climb its steep paths to gaze upon the patchwork of fields and forests below. In the geographical center of this varied and beautiful landscape sits the county seat, the city of Lancaster. In the year 1877, Lancaster was a dignified, historic, and flourishing city of approximately 6,000 inhabitants. Founded in the year 1800 by Colonel Ebenezer Zane, the blazer of the famous Zane's Trace, the city had grown from a cluster of log cabins in the wilderness to a center of commerce, law, and culture, renowned throughout the state for the intelligence of its bar and the stability of its institutions. The city is situated in the beautiful valley of the Hocking River, where the stream emerges from the level plains and enters the hill country. It is surrounded by an amphitheater of hills that shelter it from the winter winds and provide a scenic backdrop of surpassing beauty. The most prominent of these eminences is Mount Pleasant, a massive, isolated hill of sandstone that rises abruptly 250 feet above the northern edge of the town. Known to the native inhabitants as the Standing Stone, this rocky sentinel commanded a view of the Hocking Valley for 20 miles. In 1877, it was a favorite resort for the citizens, who would climb its steep paths to gaze upon the patchwork of fields and forests below. The architecture of the private residences in Lancaster was equally impressive. The city was the home of many distinguished families, and their dwellings reflected their station. The Sherman House, the birthplace of the illustrious General William Tecumseh Sherman and his brother, Senator John Sherman, stood on Main Street. It was a solid, two-story brick structure of the Federal style, modest yet dignified. The mansion of the Ewing family, perched upon the hill, was a center of social and political influence. The homes of the Stanberrys, the Hunters, the Creeds, and the Effingers were set back from the streets amidst manicured gardens of roses, lilacs, and boxwood. Financial life in 1877 centered around the banking institutions. The Hocking Valley National Bank and the Fairfield County Bank were the pillars of the local economy. Housed in solid brick edifices with iron-barred windows, these institutions held the deposits of the wealthy farmers and facilitated the trade of the merchants. The commercial district along Main Street contained dry goods stores, hardware emporiums, apothecaries, and millinery shops. supplying every need of the civilized life. Industrially, Lancaster was active but not dominated by the smoke and noise of the great manufacturing centers. The Hocking Canal, a branch of the Ohio and Erie Canal, passed through the western part of the city. Though the railroads were beginning to eclipse the canal in speed, the slow-moving canal boats were still a vital part of the economy in 1877. Laden with coal from the mines of Straitsville and wheat from the local farms, the boats moved sluggishly along the waterway, drawn by mules plodding along the towpath. The Columbus and Hocking Valley Railroad and the Cincinnati and Muskingum Valley Railroad intersected at Lancaster, their depots bustling with the arrival of passenger trains and the loading of freight. The manufacturing interests of the city included the Eagle Machine Works, which produced agricultural implements used on farms throughout the county. There were also carriage manufactories, tanneries, breweries, and flouring mills driven by the waters of the Hocking. The religious life of the city was vigorous, with the spires of the Presbyterian, Methodist, Lutheran, and Catholic churches piercing the skyline. The bells of St. Mary's and the First Presbyterian Church answered each other on Sabbath mornings, calling the faithful to worship. Leaving the gas-lit streets and brick pavements of the county seat, we turn our attention now to the northern tier of townships. This region, comprising the townships of Violet, Liberty, Walnut, and Richland, is a land of level plains, deep soil, and prosperous villages. It is the agricultural breadbasket of the county, where the glacial drift has created a terrain of surpassing fertility. Violet Township occupies the extreme northwestern corner of the county. It is a rectangular body of land, noted for the evenness of its surface and the richness of its soil. In the early days, this region was covered in dense forests of beech, sugar, maple, and elm, and the ground was carpeted with wild violets, from which the township derives its name. By 1877, the forests had largely given way to cultivated fields of wheat and corn. The township is drained by Sycamore Creek and Black Lick Creek, streams that flow northward toward the Scioto River. The principal village of Violet Township is Pickerington, laid out by Abraham Pickering in 1815. In 1877, Pickerington was a neat and thriving village of several hundred inhabitants. It contained a post office, dry goods stores, a hotel, and several mechanic shops. The Columbus and Hocking Valley Railroad cut across the corner of the township, providing a lifeline to the markets of the capital city. The family names found in Violet Township are a roll call of the pioneers: Pickering, Craner, Fenstermaker, Looker, Fishbaugh, and Hawks. The farms here were noted for their large Pennsylvania-style bank barns, painted red or white, and their comfortable frame dwellings. To the east of Violet lies Liberty Township, a central district of the northern tier. As its name suggests, it was settled by men who valued independence, many of them Swiss and German immigrants. The landscape is leveled to gently rolling, drained by Walnut Creek and Pawpaw Creek, In 1877, the township was a hive of agricultural industry. The twin towns of Basel and Baltimore, situated on opposite sides of the Ohio and Erie Canal, formed the commercial center. Baltimore, laid out in 1824, and Basel, laid out later, were effectively one community, connected by bridges over the canal and the creek. In 1877, the canal was a busy thoroughfare here. Warehouses lined the banks, filled with grain awaiting shipment to the markets of the north. The Basel paper mill was a local industry of note, utilizing the straw from the abundant wheat fields. The family names of Liberty Township included Bibler, Alt, Giese, Kumler, and Zeller. The Basel Reformed Church stood as a testament to the Swiss heritage of the founders, its bell ringing out over the valley on Sunday mornings. Walnut Township occupies the northeastern corner of the county. It is a large and wealthy township, named for the heavy growth of black walnut timber that once covered its soil. A defining feature of Walnut Township is the Licking Summit Reservoir, known in modern times as Buckeye Lake. This vast body of water, created to feed the canal system, borders the northern edge of the township. In 1877, it was a place of wild beauty, its edges marshy and teeming with waterfowl. The village of Millersport sits at the edge of the reservoir. In 1877, it was a busy canal town, where boatmen stopped for supplies and news. The village of New Salem served the eastern portion of the township, and the growing hamlet of Thurston, then known as Bush City, was becoming a railroad junction. The soil of Walnut Township is deep and alluvial, producing massive crops of corn. The pioneer families here included the Murphys, the Havers, the Solidays, and the Holmeses. The primitive Baptist church near Thurston was a landmark of the Old Faith, its simple brick structure standing amidst a grove of ancient oaks. Finally, we come to Richland Township, situated south of Walnut. As its name implies, this is a land of richness. The township is drained by Rush Creek, which flows through a beautiful and fertile valley. The villages of Rushville and West Rushville sit on opposite banks of the creek, connected by a covered bridge. These villages were centers of culture and education in the early days, home to the Rushville Academy. In 1877, they remained dignified country towns, populated by retired farmers and tradesmen. The Wiseman, Colson, and Turner families were well known in this district. We descend now from the northern tier into the central townships, a region that serves as the immediate hinterland to the county seat. This district, comprising the townships of Greenfield and Pleasant, represents a transition in the landscape. Here, the level plains of the north begin to undulate, rising into gentle swells and subsiding into fertile valleys, creating a topography that is as pleasing to the eye as it is profitable to the plow. Greenfield Township lies directly north of Lancaster. As its name suggests, it is a land of verdant pastures and extensive meadows. In 1877, the forest had been largely cleared, leaving only majestic groves of oak and sugar maple to shade the cattle. The surface of Greenfield is higher than the surrounding country, forming a watershed from which the streams flow in opposite directions. The headwaters of the Hocking River take their rise here, as do several tributaries of Walnut Creek. The soil is a rich clay loam, particularly adapted to the cultivation of wheat. In 1877, Greenfield was a township of prosperous farms rather than bustling towns. The village of Dumontville and the hamlet of Havensport were small centers where the blacksmith's hammer rang and the neighbors gathered to discuss the crops. The Carroll and Hooker stations on the Columbus and Hocking Valley Railroad provided shipping points for the township's grain. The family names of Greenfield are a testament to the stability of its settlement. The Meekers, the Albrights, the Brandonberries, the Glicks, and the Bushes. The farmhouses in this district were substantial, often built of brick burned from the local clay, with large porches facing the road to welcome the traveler. Adjoining Greenfield to the south and embracing the northern limits of Lancaster is Pleasant Township. True to its name, this township presents a landscape of agreeable variety. The northern portion is level, part of the Great Wheat Plain, while the southern portion begins to break into the hills that flank the Hocking Valley. The stream of Baldwin Run winds through the township, its waters formerly turning the wheels of woolen factories and grist mills. Fetter's Run is another significant stream, flowing crystal clear over a pebbly bed. In 1877, the agricultural wealth of Pleasant Township was legendary. The corn grew tall in the bottomlands, and the hillsides were covered with orchards of apple and peach trees. The Fairfield County Infirmary, a large and well-managed institution for the care of the indigent, was located here, standing on a farm of excellent fertility. The rural neighborhoods were knit together by country churches and one-room schoolhouses. The surnames found in the Pleasant Township records of this year include the Ewings, the Burtons, the Kagies, the Femans, and the Ruffners. The industry of these central townships was almost exclusively agricultural. There were no great smoking chimneys here, save for the occasional steam threshing engine moving from farm to farm in the harvest season. Instead, there were the quiet industries of the countryside, the cider press squeezing the juice from the autumn apples, the sorghum mill boiling the cane into molasses, and the dairy churning the cream into golden butter. The roads were kept in good repair, often macadamized with stone from the local quarries, ensuring that the produce of Greenfield and Pleasant could easily reach the markets of Lancaster. The religious life of the district was centered in the white frame meeting houses that dotted the landscape. The Methodist, Episcopal, and Lutheran congregations were particularly strong. On Sabbath mornings, the silence of the fields was broken by the pealing of church bells, calling the families of Pleasant and Greenfield to worship. It was a time of rest, of reflection, and of community, a rhythm of life that had remained unchanged for generations. Moving eastward from the county seat, the character of the land begins to change perceptibly. We enter the townships of Burn and Rush Creek, a region often called the Gateway to the Hills. Here, the influence of the Hocking River and its tributary, Rush Creek, has carved the Sandstone Plateau into a series of picturesque valleys and wooded ridges. Burn Township, named by its Swiss pioneers after the canton of their birth, lies directly east of Lancaster. In 1877, it was a township of immense beauty and distinct cultural character. The Hocking River bisects the township, flowing through a valley of great fertility. To the south of the river, the land rises into rugged hills, covered in 1877 with dense forests of oak and chestnut. The streams that drain this district include Crawfish Creek, a sparkling run that tumbles down from the uplands, and the Pleasant Run, which joins the Hocking near the city. The people of Burn were largely of Swiss and German extraction, a fact reflected in the neatness of their farms and the size of their barns. The Reber family, whose ancestors settled here early in the century, held extensive lands along the river. Other prominent names in the 1877 records include the Stukeys, the Prindles, the Pierces, and the Schellenbachs. The village of Sugar Grove, situated at the southern tip of the township on the Hocking Canal, was a bustling place. Here, the canal boats loaded stone and lumber, and the traveler could find refreshment at the local inn. To the east of Burn lies Rush Creek Township, named for the substantial stream that drains it. This township is a land of rolling hills and deep valleys. In 1877, it was transitioning from a purely agricultural district to a center of commerce, driven by the construction of the Cincinnati and Muskingum Valley Railroad. The principal town is Bremen, laid out in 1834. By 1877, Bremen was a thriving village of several hundred souls. It possessed a flour mill, a woolen factory, and several dry goods stores. The citizens of Bremen were known for their industry and their piety. The topography of Rush Creek Township is varied. The stream of Rush Creek winds through a wide valley, subject in the spring to rapid rises. The tributaries include Turkey Run and Raccoon Run. The soil in the valleys is a deep, sandy loam, while the hills are clay, suitable for grazing. The family names of this district include the Holidays, the Ashbaws, the Rowells, the McCandlishes, and the Larimers. The Presbyterian and Methodist churches in Bremen were the spiritual anchors of the community. The timber resources of Rush Creek and Burn were still significant in this year. Sawmills operated along the creeks, converting the hillside oaks into lumber for the growing towns. There were also quarries of fine sandstone, particularly in Burn Township. This stone, durable and pleasing in color, was used for the foundations of the barns and the lintels of the brick houses. The sound of the stonecutter's chisel and the sawyer's blade were the industrial melodies of these eastern townships. Agricultural life here was diversified. While wheat and corn were the staples, the farmers of Burn and Rush Creek also paid attention to livestock. Herds of short-horned cattle grazed on the hillsides, and flocks of sheep produced wool for the local factories. The Fairfield County Agricultural Society found many of its most active members in these townships, men who took pride in the improvement of their stock and the stewardship of their land. We turn our faces now to the west, toward the setting sun, to a region where the hills finally recede and the land opens up into the broad, magnificent plains of the Scioto Valley border. This district comprises the townships of Bloom and Amanda. It is a land of heavy soils, vast cornfields, and historic villages. Bloom Township occupies the northwestern section of the county, west of Greenfield. It is high, rolling land, the watershed between the Hocking and the Scioto rivers. In 1877, Bloom was famous for two things: its fertile soil and its freestone quarries. The village of Lithopolis, a name derived from the Greek meaning city of stone, was the jewel of the township. Situated on a high ridge, Lithopolis commanded a view of the country for miles around. In 1877, it was a cultured village, known for its fine stone sidewalks and the intelligence of its citizens. The quarries near the town produced a high-quality freestone used in buildings in Columbus and Lancaster. The streams of Bloom include the Little Walnut Creek and the Chestnut Ridge Creek. The village of Greencastle, located in the southern part of the township, was another center of trade, a quiet hamlet on the old stage road. The family names of Bloom Township are deeply rooted in the soil. The Courtrights, the Swopes, the Bowers, the Christies, and the Glicks. The Bloom Presbyterian Church and the Lithopolis Methodist Church were the centers of social and religious life. To the south of Bloom lies Amanda Township, a rectangle of some of the finest agricultural land in the state of Ohio. In 1877, Amanda was the corn grower's paradise. The land is level to gently rolling, drained by Clear Creek and its tributaries. The soil is a deep, dark drift, capable of producing massive yields. Great fields of corn stretch to the horizon, a sea of green rustling in the summer wind. The village of Royalton was the principal settlement in the northern part of the township, while the village of Amanda sat on the railroad in the south. In 1877, the Cincinnati and Muskingum Valley Railroad provided a direct link to the outside world, and the depot at Amanda was a busy place during the harvest. The township was also known for Dutch Hollow, a settlement of German families who retained their language and customs. The surnames of Amanda Township include the Leists, the Bars, the Wolfs, the Keigers, and the Lutzes. The streams of Amanda are worthy of note. Clear Creek, which takes its rise here, flows westward to become a stream of power and beauty. Muddy Prairie Run drains the western wetlands, which by 1877 had been largely drained and converted into rich pasture. The Amanda Mills, powered by steam and water, ground the grain for the neighborhood. The social life of these western townships was characterized by the husking bee and the barn raising. In 1877, The community spirit was strong. When a neighbor needed a new barn, the men of Bloom and Amanda would gather with their tools, and the frame of a massive structure would rise in a single day. The women would prepare a feast, and the work would be followed by a dance in the evening, the music of the fiddle echoing across the moonlit cornfields. Leaving the level corn plains of the west, we turn our gaze southward, back toward the county seat, and enter the rugged and romantic territory of Hocking Township. This district lies immediately south of Lancaster and serves as the transition zone between the cultivated plains and the wilder Appalachian Plateau. In 1877, Hocking Township was a landscape of dramatic contrasts, where fertile creek bottoms lay in the shadow of towering sandstone bluffs. The geography of Hocking Township is defined by the Hocking River, which winds through its northern portion, and by Hunter's Run and Arney Run, streams that tumble down from the southern hills. The topography here is broken and precipitous. The Great Sandstone Formation, known locally as the Black Hand Sandstone, rises in majestic cliffs, crowned with dark forests of hemlock and pine. In the valleys, the soil is a rich, sandy loam, excellent for the cultivation of corn and tobacco, while the hillsides in 1877 were covered with extensive orchards and vineyards. The Mount Pleasant eminence is but the vanguard of a range of hills that includes Christmas Rocks and Jacob's Ladder, geological formations that have stood as silent sentinels since the dawn of time. A crowning feature of this township, and indeed of the entire state, was the Ohio Reform Farm, later known as the Boys Industrial School, situated 6 miles south of Lancaster on a high, healthy ridge. Founded in 1857, this institution in 1877 was a model of Victorian benevolence. It was not a prison with bars and bolts, but a farm family system. The wayward boys of the state were housed in cottages, known as the Ohio, Hocking, Muskingum, and Scioto houses. They worked the land, tending to the vast vineyards and peach orchards that covered the 1,200 acres of the institution. The Reform Farm was a world unto itself. There was a chapel where the boys sang hymns on the Sabbath. There were workshops where they learned the trades of the blacksmith, the carpenter, and the shoemaker. There was a great dining hall where the simple, wholesome meals were served. The atmosphere was one of order, industry, and rural peace. The fruit produced here, grapes, strawberries, and peaches, was renowned for its quality and was shipped to markets as far away as Chicago. The sight of the orderly rows of fruit trees stretching across the rugged hills was a testament to the belief in redemption through labor. The rural neighborhoods of Hocking Township were inhabited by families of long standing. The Reber family, whose ancestor crossed the mountains in a wagon, possessed fine farms along the river. The Kutz family, the Embicks, the Brooks, and the Mitoffs were also prominent on the tax rolls of 1877. The village of Hamburg, located near the township line on the old Zanesville and Maysville Turnpike, was a small cluster of dwellings with a church and a store, serving the needs of the hill farmers. The industry of Hocking Township was largely confined to the soil and the stone. Several quarries operated in the sandstone bluffs, producing stone for the bridges and buildings of the county. There were also numerous grist mills located on Hunter's Run, where the rapid fall of the stream provided ample power. The names of the mills, the Rock Mill, the Stonewall Mill, spoke to the geology of the region. The timber of Hocking Township was also a source of wealth. The chestnut oak, with its tannin-rich bark, supplied the tanneries of Lancaster, while the white oak provided cooperage for barrels. The social life of Hocking Township centered around the singing schools and the literary societies held in the schoolhouses during the winter months. In 1877, the people of the hills were known for their hospitality. The latchstring was always out, and the stranger traveling the winding roads was sure to find a warm meal and a bed for the night at any farmhouse he approached. The Mount Zion Church, standing on a high elevation, was a beacon visible for miles, its white spire pointing toward the heavens above the tree line. Proceeding further south, we enter Madison Township, the most rugged and picturesque portion of Fairfield County. This is a land of deep gorges, towering precipices, and narrow, fertile valleys. In 1877, it was a region of relative isolation, where the topography dictated the settlement patterns and the roads wound tortuously around the hills. It is a township of deep, narrow valleys and high, sharp ridges, a topography that earned it the affectionate nickname, the Little Switzerland of Fairfield. Clear Creek is the defining feature of Madison Township. Entering from the west, it cuts a deep channel through the sandstone, creating a gorge of singular beauty. The walls of the valley rise hundreds of feet, covered with hemlock, laurel, and fern. In 1877, the road through this valley was considered one of the most scenic drives in the state. The creek itself, swift and cold, was the home of the brook trout and the power source for several grist mills. The tributaries that feed it, Turkey Run, and various unnamed mountain brooks, tumble down from the heights in a series of cascades. The villages of Madison Township were small but vital to the local economy. Clearport, situated in the valley, was a cluster of dwellings, a store, and a post office. Waterloo, later known as Ponders, stood at the junction of the streams. The hamlet of Revenge, a name shrouded in local legend, was a quiet crossroads. In 1877, these villages were the gathering places for the hill farmers, who brought their wool, fruit, and butter to trade for coffee and sugar. The soil of Madison is thin on the ridges but surprisingly fertile in the valleys. It was noted in this year for the production of buckwheat and potatoes. The hillsides, too steep for the plow, were given over to grazing. The sheep of Madison Township were numerous, their bells tinkling in the upland pastures. The family names of this district reflect a mixture of Virginian and Pennsylvanian stock. The Julians, the Deffenbaugh, the Abbotts, the Friend family, and the Schaeffers. The Deffenbaugh family was particularly numerous, their homesteads scattered throughout the hollows. Transportation in Madison Township was difficult. The roads were often steep and rough, and the creeks required numerous bridges. In 1877, the covered bridge was the standard solution. The Clear Creek Covered Bridge, built of stout oak timbers, spanned the rushing water, offering shelter to the traveler and a dry crossing for the mails. The streams of Madison Township are a litany of rustic names. Besides the main branch of Clear Creek, there is Arney Run, named for an early settler. There is Muddy Run. There is Turkey Run. Each of these small streams supported sawmills in 1877, for the timber resources of Madison were vast. One of the unique features of Madison Township in this era was the presence of the tobacco houses. Tobacco cultivation was a labor-intensive industry suited to the small hill farms. The crop required constant attention, planting, worming, suckering, topping, and finally cutting and housing. The curing barns were tall, narrow structures with vertical siding that could be opened to regulate the ventilation. In late autumn, the air of the Clear Creek Valley was heavy with the sweet, pungent scent of curing tobacco. We turn our faces now to the southwestern corner of the county, to Clear Creek Township. Bounded on the south by Hocking County and on the west by Pickaway County, this township occupies a transition zone between the hills and the plains. It is a historic district, one of the first areas settled in the county, and in 1877 it retained an air of antiquity and established prosperity. The township takes its name from the stream that traverses its northern portion, but it is also drained by Salt Creek in the south. The land is rolling and well-watered, the soil a productive drift that yields excellent crops of wheat. In 1877, the fields of Clear Creek were manicured and clean, the fences well-maintained, and the stock of high quality. The Clear Creek Grange was an active organization, promoting the social and intellectual welfare of the farmers, reflecting the enlightened character of the population. The principal town of the township is Tarleton. Laid out in roughly 1801, Tarleton is one of the oldest towns in the region. In the early part of the century, it was a major stop on the stagecoach route from Chillicothe to Lancaster, known as Zane's Trace. In 1877, though bypassed by the main railroad lines, Tarleton remained a village of dignity and importance. Its streets were lined with old brick houses, built in the Federal style, which had witnessed the passing of nearly 8 decades. The Tarleton Institute provided higher education to the youth of the neighborhood. The town possessed 3 churches, several stores, and a steam flouring mill. To the north of Tarleton lies the village of Stoutsville, laid out in 1854. In 1877, Stoutsville was a growing station on the Cincinnati and Muskingum Valley Railroad. It was a shipping point for the vast quantities of wheat and corn produced in the surrounding township. The grain elevators standing by the tracks were the cathedrals of commerce. The village of Oakland, situated in the northern part of the township near the Madison line, was a smaller center, noted for the beauty of its location among the oaks. The family names of Clear Creek Township are a roll call of the early Ohio frontier. The Stout family, for whom the village was named, were prominent merchants. The Barr family, the Leist family, the Shoemakers, the Kreitz, and the Julian family were all deeply rooted in the soil. The Reichelderfer clan, in particular, was numerous, descending from German stock that had migrated from Pennsylvania. Their farms covered a significant portion of the Salt Creek district, and their reunions were events of considerable magnitude. A unique feature of Clear Creek Township was the 16-Mile House, an old tavern stand on the Zanesville and Maysville Turnpike. In 1877, though the drovers no longer moved vast herds of cattle down the road to market as in days of yore, the old tavern stood as a reminder of the bustling traffic of the past. The stories of the old stage drivers were still told by the firesides of Tarleton. The streams of Clear Creek Township meandered through meadows of bluegrass. Muddy Run, despite its name, was a vital source of water for the livestock. Dutch Hollow Run flowed through a settlement of Pennsylvania Germans who maintained their distinct dialect and customs well into the 19th century. We have journeyed together through the 13 townships of Fairfield County. We have walked the gas-lit streets of Lancaster, climbed the sandstone cliffs of Madison, and stood amidst the cornfields of Walnut. Now, as the shadows lengthen across the landscape of 1877, we turn our gaze to the institutions that bind these people together, and to the quiet rhythm of the seasons that governs their lives. In the year 1877, the true heart of Fairfield County was not found in the courthouse or the bank, but in the one-room schoolhouse. There were over 100 of these humble structures scattered across the county, roughly one for every 2 square miles. They stood at the crossroads of Liberty and Violet, in the hollows of Burn and Hawking, and on the windy ridges of Richland. Built of brick or white-painted frame, they were the beacons of civilization in the rural districts. Inside these walls, the youth of the county learned the lessons of the McGuffey readers. The names of the teachers in 1877 were often the names of the neighbors: Miss Alice Barr, Mr. Samuel Sturgeon, Miss Mary Kagi, and Mr. John Shop. In the winter months, the schoolhouse was the center of social life. The spelling bee and the literary society drew families from miles around. The bobsleds would arrive, bells jingling in the frosty air, and the room would fill with the warmth of the pot-bellied stove and the sound of neighborly conversation. The religious life of the county was equally pervasive. The skyline of every village, Lithopolis, Baltimore, Bremen, Tarleton, was pierced by the spires of faith. In the open country, the meeting house stood as a silent sentinel over the fields. The German Reformed and Lutheran congregations were dominant in the German districts of Burn, Rush, Creek, and Liberty, while the Methodist and Presbyterian faiths held sway in Greenfield, Pleasant, and Lancaster. The graveyards adjoining these churches were the archives of the county's history. Here, Under the shade of ancient cedars rested the pioneers. The mossy stones bore the names that we have recited throughout this journey: the Ruffners, the Carpenters, the Wisemans, the Courtrights, and the Ewings. In 1877, the care of these sacred grounds was a community duty, a sign of respect for those who had cleared the forest and broke the sod. Let us reflect now upon the cycle of the seasons that dictated the life of the 33,000 souls who called this county home. It was a life of unhurried industry, a life moved by the sun and the rain. The year began in winter, when the county lay under a blanket of white. The fields of Amanda and Bloom were silent, the wheat sleeping beneath the snow. The Hocking River was often locked in ice, the mill wheels still. The sound of the axe in the woodlot was the primary music of the season, as the farmers of Madison and Hocking felled the timber for the coming year. It was a time of rest, of mending harness, and of long evenings by the fire. Then came spring, with the unlocking of the waters. Rush Creek, Clear Creek, and Walnut Creek swelled with the melt, rushing turbid and brown toward the river. The plows turned the earth in Greenfield and Pleasant, revealing the rich, dark soil that was the county's gold. The orchards of Bern burst into clouds of pink and white, filling the valleys with fragrance. The corn was planted in the straight rows that were the pride of the farmer. Summer brought the heat and the labor. The hay was made in June, the sweet scent of clover hanging heavy over the hills of Richland. The wheat harvest in July was the climax of the year. The steam traction engines chugged from farm to farm, and the threshing crews gathered at the tables of the Rebbers and the Leists to share the noon meal. The corn grew tall and dark green, rustling in the hot winds of August. Finally, autumn, the season of Thanksgiving. The corn was shocked in the fields of Violet and Liberty, the golden stalks standing like regiments in the failing light. The pumpkins lay orange among the stubble. The tobacco was stripped in the barns of Clear Creek, the air pungent with the curing leaf. The cider presses turned in Amanda, and the cellars were stocked with potatoes, apples, and turnips against the coming cold. Before we close the book, let us recite one last time the names of the waters that nurture this land, the liquid genealogy of the earth. The Hocking River, the mother stream. Rush Creek, the carrier of the eastern waters. Clear Creek, the carver of the Sandstone Gorge. Walnut Creek, the feeder of the lakes. Little Walnut, the drain of the north. Sycamore Creek, Pawpaw Creek, Poplar Creek, Muddy Prairie Run, Turkey Run, Arney Run, Hunter's Run, Fetter's Run, Baldwin Run. These streams flow on, indifferent to the passing of years, turning the wheels, watering the herds, and carrying the history of Fairfield County to the sea. And now, the year 1877 draws to its close. The gas lamps in the streets of Lancaster are flickering low. The canal boats are moored for the night at Baltimore and Carroll. The fires in the hearths of Tarleton and Lithopolis have burned down to glowing embers. The cattle are stabled in the great barns of Bloom. The sheep are folded in the hills of Bern. A profound, velvet silence descends upon the landscape. The history book is closed. The dust settles back upon the archives. The figures of the past, the pioneers, the millers, the school teachers, and the farmers fade back into the mists of time, leaving behind only the enduring earth and the memory of a people who loved it well. And thus, we close the entry for Fairfield County. Rest well.